Hey gang, welcome to episode 2 of Low Lead. In this episode, I stand around and point at some things. We also cut the cabanes off, shortened them about 8 inches, and we share a video of some sunset biplane flying from last September. Alright, let's get to it. Low Lead. Just a group of friends having big adventures in small airplanes and sharing some of the fun and lessons we learn along the way. Hey folks, welcome to episode 2 of Low Lead. A couple quick things before we jump into it. First, as you've probably noticed, there's no Mike today. He is working on a master's degree program and is currently buried up to his neck in schoolwork. So last I heard, his wife has tied him to a chair and he's not allowed to leave the house until he gets caught up. So we should be seeing him next month for episode 3, but he's very busy right now. So I'll be filming this one on my own. The other thing was, Mike and I were a bit unprepared for the response to episode 1. We figured this is something that would be watched by a few of our friends and maybe a handful of other people would stumble upon it. So the response to episode 1 was completely overwhelming to us, and we just wanted to say thank you to everybody that watched, commented, liked, subscribed. You guys totally blew us away and we're floored, so thank you. Jumping into today's plan. Since last time around, we introduced ourselves and we introduced Mike's airplane. We thought the next logical step would be to introduce my airplane, which is why we're in my garage. My aircraft is a project. Been working on it for a few years. Definitely have a few more years to go as I kind of chip away at it when the budget allows. And being a flight instructor, that's occasionally. So we wanted this to feature in some future episodes and give some progress updates as it moves along. So today is going to be kind of centered around introducing my bad idea. And then we're going to go ahead and switch over to some footage from a sunset flight that I got to do last September in TacAero's Waco UPF-7. It was an evening hanging out with the coworkers, and I threw a camera on the airplane. We all went flying, and it was a good time. We thought you guys would enjoy it, and this seems like a good opportunity to share that since I don't have Mike here to go on flying adventures with. So I hope you guys enjoy, and we'll go ahead and get to it. All right, folks, so here's my bad idea. This started a few years back after one of my really good friends bought a Starduster 2 and had no tailwheel endorsement. So he asked me to help him get that sorted out. We took care of it, and in the course of that, I wound up falling in love with his 4-aileron Starduster 2. It's just a really fun, easy flying airplane. A bit challenging on landings, but I enjoy a little bit of a challenge, and it definitely is just a joy to fly. So I decided I really wanted one, had to have my own. I started shopping around, couldn't afford one at the time, so I started looking at projects and figured if I'm going to build my own, I may as well put a round engine on it because that'd look really cool. And since it's experimental, why not put it on floats? Because seaplanes are awesome. So that's what got me started down this path. And I shopped around for a while, finally found a project up in Port Angeles, Washington. And while talking to one of my buddies down here about my idea for this round engine biplane on floats, he got really excited. I told him I was going to go look at one, and he said, well, I'll drive you up there. We'll take my truck and trailer, and maybe we'll bring it home. And we brought it home. And so now I have an airplane in the garage. And when I got it, it was almost a complete airplane. Had skin on it. Everything was there. Wings were covered, just basically missing an engine. A couple other small details, but nothing that would have delayed the assembly too far. But shortly after I got it home, I also got a phone call from a gentleman who is the Starduster expert. He is actually a self-prescribed Starduster historian, but also has worked on or flown probably over half of the Stardusters ever built. He's built, I think, probably close to a half dozen himself, and worked at the original factory where they were assembled, or where the projects were assembled. Anyway, he called me up and said, oh yeah, you bought this one. That was the worst flying 2-aileron Starduster I'd ever flown. And while that normally would have been really disheartening, I had already wanted to make some big changes. So that just helped me feel better about going back and undoing some of the previous work. Anyway, so that's how I wound up with this project, and that's the project I ended up buying. While I was looking at engines and trying to figure out what I could afford to put on the front of this airplane, I realized most of the round engines I wanted were out of my price range. They were either rare, uncommon, or really sought after. So I had to look for some other options, and a coworker and friend of mine suggested a Ranger inline 6-cylinder from a Fairchild aircraft. And I was a little unfamiliar with them at the time, but he said it had been done on a Starduster before, and I looked up pictures of the airplane, and it turns out it's drop dead gorgeous. And it also has that nice long slender nose like a Schneider Cup racer from the 1930s, which I also very much love. So I wound up tracking down a couple of Ranger engines. I bought them, brought them home. I have one that's going to get overhauled, and I have another one for spare parts, which is what I'm using up here for the jig to get the motor mount design and geometry figured out. So if you know anything about Rangers, you'll recognize that mine is currently upside down. A Ranger engine is typically an inverted inline 6-cylinder with cylinders hanging down, which is it's a cool engine, but anybody who knows radial engines or any kind of older engines knows that cylinders hanging down, you can get hydraulic locking, which is when oil pools in the bottom of your cylinders, and on a compression stroke, since oil doesn't compress, you can start bending connecting rods and breaking big parts of your airplane, or at least your engine. Which is why if you watch anybody flying a radial engine aircraft, after it's been sitting for a little while, they pull that propeller through in order to make sure or clear out any oil in those cylinders, because you can feel it by hand. You can't feel it with a starter. So that being a concern and wanting to put this on floats, one of the best ways to deal with that is to pull spark plugs, drain the oil out of that cylinder. That makes a big mess. And if you're on the ground, less of a big deal. You can kind of wipe it up, clean up your mess. If you're on the water, that's a huge mess that I don't personally want to be responsible for. So doing a little bit of further research, learned you can turn the Ranger engines upside down, which now seems right side up for the average person. Do away with that hydraulic locking issue, and they still work just fine. It's actually a really simple modification to the plumbing on it to make it work. So that's the plan. So we're putting an upside down Ranger inline 6 on the front. Almost looks like a V12. I can't afford a Falconer V12, obviously, and it would probably be a little excessive for this airplane anyway. All right, moving on. So a couple other things that have happened on this is did some work to the main suspension so that I can put Acme gear on there in the future. After doing a bunch of bush flying and flying with Acme suspension, I absolutely love it. So my plan is eventually, when I can afford it, buy myself some Acme shocks for this airplane. But while we were doing that work, we made some other kind of big mods, mostly to the cabanes up top. So what happened and precipitated that was, while doing research about the engine cowlings and looking up inspiration online, I stumbled upon an airplane called the Curtiss XP-10. It was a fighter prototype biplane from about 1928 that never went into production, mostly because it had big major cooling issues with the radiators that were in the upper wing. So the airplane has faded into obscurity, but the design stuck with me and kind of haunted me for a while, and eventually I decided, yeah, I really want to do that with mine. So what we did is we cut off the cabanes, we shortened them about 8 inches, and then added this external bracing out here. And these struts are inspired by the Curtiss XP-10 design. It has similar external struts. And then we're going to do away entirely with the center section and put this big gull wing transition to the wing root. And I think it's going to look really, really cool. So that's the other really big bad idea on this build that I'm going with. Other than that, not much is changing further aft. We're going to put float fittings, did a wooden turtle deck, and I built myself some carbon fiber pieces after watching a few too many Mike Patey videos. So that's the current status of the build. I have a few things I'm kind of chipping away at right now, but nothing very impressive or exciting to watch unfold. there will be updates in the future, but I think that's enough talking. Let's cut to that biplane flying, and then we will talk to you guys later. All right. Hey folks, all right, so that's it for episode 2. That said, next time, episode 3, we've got a fun little trip planned. I've managed to track down some hard to find pieces for my aircraft build, so we're going to grab a couple airplanes. Mike and I are going to fly up to Bellingham, Washington on a parts run, and we're going to take you guys along for that. It should be a really fun little trip. So, all that being said, until next time, fly safe, and hopefully we'll see you around the airport. Take care. We're going to try again. Take 49.